The Rocky Mountain Raptor program. I'm Pat McCracken, and we're going to continue our migration series today. And as you probably note, I have a turkey vulture with me. And turkey vultures are one of the most noticeable migration birds that we'll see. And for partly reasons, they are very social, so they fly together. And secondly, they're huge birds. They have 5 to 6.5 foot wingspan, and so they're really easy to spot. So they're quite beautiful birds. Go ahead. And I wanted to show you a computer model of what turkey vulture migration looks like. Turkey vultures are the most widely distributed of all the New World vultures. And when this thing comes around again, I'll start with January, and you can just watch the colors change. And purple means there's a lot of them. So I'm going to start here. January, February, March, April, May, hello Canada, July, August, September, here they come, November, December, and they're gone already. Oh my goodness. And as they migrate, speaker view, sorry. The first turkey vultures you see are likely to be heading farther north. And there you go. Let me give this guy a little snack and see if he'd like to have something to eat while I'm rattling on here. Oh, there you go. Can you do that? That's a big piece. So the first ones you'll see are probably going farther north, and they do travel in these huge kettles, and as they come through, they do take breaks. So it's very likely that you have a tree in your city or in your region that is the turkey vulture migration tree, and so they'll take a break there. They probably won't stay there very long, but they'll stay there a few days. They're fascinating to watch, and you don't want to get too close to them because they're going to. You don't want to scare them, but you can watch them. And at first, you'll be kind of shocked. There's so many birds in the tree, and then you're going to be amazed if they fly away because they can be shocked by anything. Like a dog barking. And somewhere between 20 and 100 birds are going to fly out of that tree, and they just take off. And then they fly up in the air, and they in their beautiful wings they soar, and they play in the wind. If there's a storm, you want to run outside and watch the turkey vultures because they don't hide in the trees during a storm. They fly. They go up in the sky, and they're such great flyers that they soar, and they do these cuts down into your yard, and they're just wonderful. And then one morning, after you've really gotten used to having them there, you really like them, you get up in the morning and they're all gone. And you say, oh my gosh. But they'll be back. It's not the same group. Another group will be back in a few days or a week or two, and those are also headed north. And the local turkey vultures aren't going to use that tree. They'll migrate up to their spot, which is probably a river bottom or some open plain where they're accustomed to being. And they'll save that migration tree until they're on their way back. So it's nice to know what to call tuvus. This is a tuvu. That's his abbreviation of his English version of his name, turkey vulture. And if you see a whole bunch of turkey vultures soaring in the air, it's called a kettle. And if you see them sitting in a tree or see them sitting on the ground, it's a committee. And if they're eating, like right now, it's a wake. And if you see a bunch of them sitting off under a shade tree around a box, it's a Zoom call. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. Sorry. So let me tell you a little bit about this turkey vulture. So he came to us in 1988. He is our oldest ambassador, and we knew he was even older than that because he had arthritis. So we knew that he was older, and that means he's more than 33 years old. So he's a pretty old guy. he had a broken carpal metacarpus, which is your in a bird, it's your combination. That's all right. It's it's your combination between your wrist and your hand. And where we have many, many bones in our wrist and our hand, theirs have been, over time, have been drawn down into just one bone. And that bone was broken, and it healed. But it didn't heal really, really well. He still has some remnant problems with it. He also had frostbite. And as we go through this, you'll notice his feet. He's lost 3 toes to frostbite. So he still gets along, he still gets around pretty well, even being an old guy. And he has got so much personality, it's just lovely to work with these guys. So as you can see, turkey vultures are dark feathers, and they appear iridescent. And just like a bluebird, if you see the iridescence, that shininess, that's not a color, that's the light refracting off of the feathers, just like a crystal. And it crystallizes into these incredibly beautiful colors. But it's not a color, it's a physics of the feather. And they're pretty easy to spot because they have a dihedral flight. They kind of fly in a V when they're flying, and they usually fly in more than one. So if you see several great big birds flying together that aren't seagulls, and red tails might travel in a group of 2, ospreys a couple, but only the turkey vultures. And if you see one come over, turn around and you'll see 3 or 4 or 5 behind you coming back along as well. And if you notice them, they have this dihedral wing, the V, and they're flying close to the ground, and they're teetering, and they're doing that flight on purpose, because it gives them the lift off of the ground to keep them suspended fairly near the ground, so that they can keep their smell going, because they're looking for prey. So as they're flying there, they're very easy to see. And as you can see, he's got a featherless red head, and that's because he sticks it in really gross dead animals to eat them, and he can't clean his head. So he's got that beautiful head, and as you can see through his nose. And the theory is having a nose that's covered up. There you go. Having a nose that's covered up gives him the ability to deflect the air and the ability to smell better. Smell better is an odd use of words around a turkey vulture. It improves his ability to pick up a scent, because turkey vultures definitely don't smell good. They're scavengers. Their Latin name is Carthus aura, which is Latin for cleansing breeze. And it's an incredibly appropriate name for a premier scavenger like this, because what's amazing about turkey vultures and vultures in general is their digestive system is so strong that they're able, when they consume a carcass that might be pretty old, it might have some disease, it might have anthrax, or it might have some things that would travel to us and be very deadly. Their digestive system wipes it out. They're a dead end for pathogens. Other animals that eat them, foxes or lions or eagles, they can't do that. They just spread the disease. They don't eliminate it. So this is a very cleansing breeze, which we should all be grateful for, because he keeps our environment clean. Turkey vultures don't have vocal cords the way other birds might. They're missing the syrinx, which is in human form, that's the larynx. And so all he can do is hiss and grunt. So if he were to get mad at me, I shouldn't do it because he might get upset, but he'll and immature ones stomp their feet. It's really cute. So if that doesn't work, he's always got a reserve of food. In fact, he did it when we brought him in here. The way he defends himself is he regurgitates his food. And there is no smell that's more disgusting than a turkey vulture's smell. And if we had odoriferous microphones, you could pick them up for the smell we have right here, because we just cleaned them up. So I mentioned his digestive system is really strong. He he's got a lot of uric acid in his stomach, and as he clambers around eating a carcass, a lot of those germs and bacteria get on his feet. He defecates on his feet, he poops on them, and it drips down, and because he's got all that bacteria on him, and that liquid actually kills the bacteria on his feet. So turkey vultures are just amazing animals, and just beautiful flyers. So we're all aware that climate change is happening, and I'm going to depict that in the next growth chart. And I'm going to give this one full round, and you can see this is from 1971 through 2010. And if you don't use plant zone numbers when you buy your spring plants, you should. So you can see how the planting zones are migrating north. You can see from 1971 to 2010, and then this chart just stops to show you just the net difference between each one. And so you can see we're migrating north. And unfortunately, if these changes are allowed to continue, the natural cycle that we witness in the seasons as they change are going to be impacted, and the severe out-of-sync extreme events will continue. So I'm not going to go through a lot of conversation on climate change. I'm sure you wouldn't like to hear that. But what I am going to talk about is a really interesting thing called false spring. And this chart that you're looking at here, a false spring is a phenomenon where there's a period in late winter or early spring where the temperature rises, not just for a nice day, as which we all love. In the summer, that's what's nice about Colorado, is you get a 60-degree day. But it rises for long enough that you begin to get melt, and plants start to awaken. So as the plants start to awaken, there is a merger of spring where all the events come together very critically, and it's been going on for thousands and thousands of years, the natural cycle where producers start to grow and insects start to come out, birds start to arrive, mammals come out, and a false spring makes all this stuff start earlier. And then for it to be a real false spring, it freezes again. It goes back to winter, and it's just messed everything up. And these have begun to happen, and they're starting to happen more often. Back in 1956, a guy from the Montana State University gathered 2,500 volunteers together from 12 different states, and they picked two plants. They picked lilac and honeysuckle, and they called that the beginning of spring. And they counted them in two ways. One was when they bloomed, and the second one was when they leafed out. So we've got, what is that, 70 years of data, and he's since passed away, and the USGS, U.S. Geological Survey, has taken over the enterprise, but there is still an organization that uses volunteers, and you're looking at one of their charts here, that if you can see the deep red, that is showing you when springs arrive and how much earlier it is. Is it 20 days earlier? That's, you can see in the northeast or down in the south, or is it 20 days late? So they've been keeping track of this by noticing those blooms and the leafing of the lilacs and the honeysuckle. And they also do, you can look at this chart, and that shows you the comparison over the previous decades. So the darker green it is, that means like up in Maine, that's the coldest, that's the earliest spring in many decades. The light green is about 1 out of every 4 years spring happens at that. And as you can see in the West, we have a really spotty show of sometimes we have early springs and sometimes we have late springs. So it's mostly happening in the Northwest, and it's happening in the Southeast and the Southwest. So it's a very important aspect that we should pay attention to. Uh, so what this does is it just unravels the relationships that have existed for so many eons. And migratory birds have it the worst because they're coming up from somewhere else. Like this guy was down in Argentina, perhaps, a turkey vulture, and they wouldn't know that we had an early spring. So birds might arrive, and the plants might have bloomed, and the bugs might have come out, and all the food that a bird might need to survive are gone. And the birds, if the birds don't survive, then the raptors who come up after them are not going to survive. If a marmot wakes up early from hibernation and finds all his food frozen, he's going to have tough time surviving. So we know that these events are happening, and they're happening more often. It's sort of a subset of climate change that people are following, and I'd never heard of it before, and I thought I would share that with you. Commercial agriculture is also suffering from this. In 2017, they had a serious early spring, and they estimated that Michigan suffered a fruit tree loss of over $500 million. And if you recall, last year we entirely missed the Palisades peach crop because they had an April freeze. So these things are very serious. We're still eating here. Go ahead. So one other thing I'd like to talk about briefly is in fall of last year, in 2020, there was a bird die-off in northern New Mexico and Colorado, southern Colorado, and they found many, many, many birds that were just dead on the ground. They didn't know how it happened. They've collected the birds, they've analyzed them, they're continuing to do this analysis. But if you recall, during the fire season that we had, the smoke was just horrible. And in October, we had a wonderful snowfall. And the temperatures went down into the single digits. It froze, it was a hard freeze for several days. We had quite a bit of snow, not enough snow, but we had, in the mountains, they had feet of snow. That killed the bugs that were around. The birds were still needing to migrate, so there was a lack of food. They continued to migrate. They went ahead and migrated, and as you can see on this chart, you can see the path of the cooling. This is Albuquerque. It got down to 43 when all of this death happened, with really high winds, and the birds just ran out of energy, and they died. And so it's a tragic loss, but it's something that it's not, since it was fall and not spring, it's not technically a false spring, but it has the similar connotations to it because it throws everybody off. Excuse me. I think he got rid of his supper here. So that is another thing we should keep our eye on. Are you watching this? Is this on? Is this funny or what? I love this guy. One of the things that are so unique about turkey vultures, all the other birds we work with, the hawks and eagles, and they're all solitary birds, but turkey vultures are social. It's not that they like me or like our companionship, but they are social birds. They will. If a turkey vulture were to get out of his enclosure, he's more likely to come to you than away from you. So they are. Now that's not to say you should go find a turkey vulture and make him your pet. They make really lousy pets. The first criteria for a pet is being house trained, and these guys are definitely not house trained. So how can we help these? How can we help these birds? Well, I was on social media, and there was on Mother's Day, you recall, we had a huge rainstorm. We had beautiful days before Mother's Day, and then the clouds came in. We had a huge rainstorm, not a huge rainstorm, but a big rainstorm, and it kept the clouds for several days. Well, that was in the prime migration time. We're right at the end of the prime migration We're right at the end of migration time now, but it's still going on. But that was in the middle of the prime time, and birds won't travel in that kind of weather, so they come down and they land and they wait it out. Well, on the social media site, people were complaining how many birds were populating their bird feeders, and people were suggesting, well, just stop feeding your birds for a week and wait till it stabilizes. And fortunately, some other people had come in and said, no, 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 they're migrating, they're really hungry, feed them and feed them, feed them. And so that's what we can do, is we can raise bird-friendly yards, get rid of some of the grass. Don't be so neat when you rake up your leaves. Leave that habitat. There's food in there. There's hiding places. There's places to keep warm in there. Plant native plants. And in the winter, if it gets really cold, put out, or if you have one of these spring issues, fall springs, put out some bird food and put out some water. You'd be amazed if you're a photographer. If you put out water, you'd be amazed at the kind of birds that show up in your backyard. There is not much water in Colorado, and water is a magnet. Of course, you got to make sure that it doesn't get all full of bacteria. You have to clean it, stuff like that. Would you like to try something else? So we have something else you might like to play with here. And if you give me a minute, I am going to show you. I cleaned his cage last Thursday. This might be a little too gross for being on YouTube. And there was a rat tail that was completely skinned. He would grab one end of it and he would pull it off. He works on it all night long. And they are so interesting to watch them eat. So please sign on to our YouTube channel and follow us there's some links on the next slide. You can follow us on that. We have a Swainson soiree coming up at the end of June, where we're going to actually be face-to-face with people out in our parking lot. So you should look that up. It's at the end of June, and come out and visit with us and have a chat. So thank you much for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.